Welcome to the YouTube video channel for my new book, Seed of Israel, DNA Guide to Tracing Your Jewish Ancestry, available on Amazon in ebook and paperback versions. Links to order your copy are below. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get more videos like this. In this video, I didn't actually want to make this video. I don't think because at this point, I just think it's ridiculous that I should even have to make a video like this and explain why people like Israeli historian Shlomo Sand and Israeli geneticist Elhan Elreich are absolute frauds, and they have no credibility and should not be taken seriously, as should anybody that is still putting forward the completely discredited, debunked Khazar origins theory or hypothesis for Ashkenazi Jews. This is a theory that is used by anti-Semites and anti-Zionists to attempt to distance Jews from our ancestral homeland of Israel by saying that we are products of mass conversion of the Khazarian kingdom in the 8th century, who are a Turkic people in Central Asia that they say converted en masse to Judaism, and that's where Eastern European Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, come from. And so we have no genetic ancestral connection to Israel. And it is absolute bunk. It is absolute nonsense. This has been debated for decades and decades. Books have been written about it. Studies have been done about it. And it's just amazing to me. It's still like pops up, you know, and I get comments on my videos and in my articles and Facebook and social media posts occasionally about this Khazar theory, and there is just no basis for it. You know, what clearly there is a basis for the Rhineland theory, Rhineland hypothesis of Ashkenazi Jewish migration from Israel to Italy, up the boot of Italy to the Rhineland, and then eastward to Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe. And I've made previous videos about this. I've written about this, about the Rhineland theory of Israel to Italy to the Rhineland to Eastern Europe. And there's way more evidence for that than there is for the Khazarian theory. So sorry to tell you about that, Shlomo Sand and Elreich, but you guys are wrong, absolute wrong, and you're doing a real disservice to the Jewish people by continuing to put this forward. And it just, at this point, it's just complete sheer ignorance to continue to put forward this Khazarian theory. And I'm going to give you some examples of why. It should be just absolutely, the Khazar theory of origins theory for Ashkenazi Jews should absolutely be put in the dustbin of history. So here's a study that and I'll link to all this below. But this study by Doron Behar, called No Evidence from Genome-Wide Data of a Khazar Origin for the Ashkenazi Jews, concludes that analysis of Ashkenazi Jews, together with a large sample from the region of the Khazar Khaganate, corroborates the earlier results that Ashkenazi Jews derive their ancestry primarily from populations of the Middle East and Europe, that they possess considerable shared ancestry with other Jewish populations, and that there is no indication of a significant genetic contribution from either from within or from north of the Caucasus region. And, you know, other genetic studies have shown this, and my personal DNA testing has shown this, and I wrote a book about this, that Ashkenazi Jews have origins in the Levantine Middle East, in the land of Israel. We either left voluntarily in the Mediterranean diaspora or involuntarily taken as slaves, as captives in the Jewish-Roman Wars, and taken to Italy. And so we are mostly a Levantine Middle Eastern from Israel and Southern European from Southern Italy population. So mostly sort of the East Mediterranean sort of population, And so most of our, maybe 50-50, 60-40, 40-60, however, it varies, Middle Eastern, European, but most of that European is from Southern Europe. It's Mediterranean Europe from antiquity, and Greco-Roman type, mixing with Judeans from the Middle East. So, I talked about Apulia in southern Italy as being where the European diaspora kind of began. We are genetically similar to Southern Italians and Sicilians and Greeks and other Western diaspora Jews, Sephardic, North African, Italian Jews, Romaniot, Greek Jews, and then also Levantine Middle Eastern people, Lebanese, Palestinian Arabs, Israeli Arabs, Samaritans, Jordanians, Syrians, Druze. So, plenty of genetic evidence that completely goes against any kind of Khazar theory. So there's an article, then I just want to give you some other reasons besides genetics as to why there is just no connection. There was no conversion of the Khazar, mass conversion of the Khazars, and there's no connection with Ashkenazi Jews. And then this article is titled "Ashkenazi Jews Are Not Khazars. Here's the Proof" by Alexander Bader, who is a linguist and the author of reference books about Jewish names and the history of Yiddish. And so he gives historical reasons that there's just no evidence for this mass conversion to Judaism of the Khazars. He says there's no historiographical data available to connect Jews who lived in Eastern Europe in the 14th century with their co-religionists from the 10th century Khazaria. And and he also, it's not only just a lack of historical records or evidence. And again, I'll link to this article below. So I'm just not going to get into too much of the details. So I just welcome you to follow the links and to read the article. But he says history is not the only discipline to debunk the Khazarian hypothesis. Linguistics and the study of Yiddish help rule out the Khazarian ancestry for today's Jews. So he says that since the 17th century, Yiddish was the vernacular language of all Jews of Eastern Europe, and its main structural elements are German, though during the past centuries they underwent a strong influence of Slavic languages. Also another fraud is this guy Paul Wechsler, who's just a completely discredited linguist. And so he claimed that there's Turkic and Iranian elements hidden in Yiddish, and that's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense, and he talks about this here. So again, Shlomo Sand, Elron Elhek, and Paul Wechsler, they need to be relegated to the dustbin of history too, along with their discredited Khazarian hypothesis. Anyway, like I said, I'm not going to go into all the details here, but he said a third discipline can also help us put to rest the Khazarian hypothesis, onomastics, or the study of proper names. And he says looking at names, both first names and surnames, gives us a sense of how communities saw itself, etc., etc. And in the Jewish communities in Eastern Europe over the past 6 centuries, not a single Turkic name can be found in documents listing Jewish names. So he says even in documents from the 15th and 16th centuries dealing with Jews who lived in the territories of modern Ukraine and Belarus have no such names. So, and then he goes into genetics, which I've gone into before, and and let's see. So there's also, I downloaded a paper by Shaul Stampfer, and he's the Rabbi Edward Sandro Professor of Soviet and East European Jewry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Emeritus. And he did a paper that was published in, I believe, Jewish Social Studies, and it's titled "Did the Khazars Convert to Judaism?" And I downloaded it from JSTOR.org at $15, and but it's well worth the read. because he really spent a lot of time studying the lack of historical evidence for mass conversion of the Khazarian kingdom. And I'm just going to read you the conclusion from this paper that I really recommend you download. It says, did the Khazars, or a significant group of Khazars headed by their king, convert to Judaism or not? The simplest and most convincing answer is that the story of Khazar Jewishness is a legend with no factual basis. The Hebrew sources are pseudo-epigraphic. The Arabic sources are best understood as rumors, and the other sources are not convincing. In other words, there never was a conversion of a Khazar king or the Khazar elite. This means that many pages of Jewish history, Russian history, and certainly Khazar history have to be rewritten. If there never was a conversion, issues such as Jewish influence on early Russia and ethnic contact must be reconsidered. So basically, the simplest explanation is, again, it just goes back to the Rhineland theory. And Dr. Stampfer says that, the probability there were no Khazars converted to Judaism. And basically, he puts forward that the Jews of Eastern Europe were largely descended from a small group of migrants from the Czech lands and southeastern Germanic lands, who he says came from very prosaic reasons, to make a living. I think there's also other reasons. They were fleeing persecution in Germanic lands as well, in other areas of Western Europe. And so I'm just going to end the video with just a little bit of, it's fragmentary evidence, but there's certainly more evidence to lead towards the Rhineland theory, that these Jews from Western Europe migrated to Eastern Europe, and that formed the basis for Eastern European Jewry. I'm not saying that there weren't other Jews that came, Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews from the Ottoman Empire, other Jews possibly from the Black Sea region, and maybe other areas, but most of them were these Rhineland Jews, who originally came up from southern Italy, and who before that were originally from Judea, from the indigenous ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, the land of Israel. And so I'm just going to quote from a couple of academic sources. The Encyclopedia of Global Religion, Volume 1, by Mark Juergensmeyer and Wade Clark Ruth, says in the section on Ashkenaz that in the 15th century, many Ashkenazi Jews began to migrate out of the Rhineland after being expelled from France in 1182, and then again in 1394, and facing anti-Semitism in Germany. They began settling in other parts of Europe, with most moving eastwards into parts of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, and as far as Russia. They carried with them the same Jewish traditions that they had developed throughout their time in the Rhineland, and they continued to focus their studies on the Torah. And so this is from another book called The Jews of Poland, A Social and Economic History of the Jewish Community, from 1100 to 1800 by Bernard D. Weinrib. And I seem to have lost my place in here, so just bear with me. I'm just going to find it real quick. And let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is beginning in the Middle Ages, immigration and settlement. And there is a legend. My great-grandfather's name was Abraham Prochownik, which was later changed to Prohovnik, but there is a legend that a Jew, Abraham Prochownik, was the first arrival in Poland, and he was duly proclaimed prince. So, but that's just a legend. But I'm going to talk about some actual history here. And let's see, it just goes into different theories, including the Khazar theory, which again has been discredited. But I'm just going to read you the conclusion here, and then I'll end the video. So, down here. And okay. So this is where did they come from? Okay. And then it gives evidence of the German Jewish background of Polish Jews that came from Germany in the 14th and 15th centuries. And it says all this information, though fragmentary, indicates that the bulk of Polish Jewry was of German Bohemian origin in the 13th and 14th centuries, when Jewish settlement in Poland was founded. Although a few individuals may have come from Italy or from the Genoese colony in Kaffa, Theodosia, on the Black Sea coast. So, yeah. And then it says more Jewish immigrants reached Poland during the 15th century, a time of frequent persecutions in Germany, Austria, Silesia, and Bohemia, and of expulsions from many cities and regions. So, again, aligns with the Rhineland theory. From the Rhineland, from Germany, Germanic lands, Czech lands, Western Europe to Eastern Europe. And thank you for watching.